Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto has harem with female Haku and Hinata Temari? Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Naruto sat up with a groan, clutching his aching head. Last thing he remembered was fighting against Sasuke, being on the verge of winning, and being stabbed in the back, both figuratively and literally, with a needle holding a strong sedative, by Sakura in an attempt to curry favor with Sasuke. Just before darkness took him, he could remember seeing a golden beam coming from Sasuke's hand, going through her heart, and hearing him call her pathetic. After that, all he had were flashes of a cave, Akatsuki cloaks, some guy that looked like an even prettier Versi. On of Sasuke standing next to the bastard, the fox calling someone a red-eyed geriatric, and then Kyuubi mumbling about do-overs. Naruto suddenly paused when he thought over the flashes, and tried to make something of them. Kyuubi calling someone a geriatric. Now that's a pot and kettle moment if there ever was one. Taking in his surroundings, Naruto found himself in what appeared to be a massive white waiting room. There were people milling about, some that looked like they might be from the elemental countries, and some that looked far too bizarre to be from anywhere near any place he knew. Standing on shaky legs, he stood, and decided to get some answers. Heading over to one of the desks, he rapped on the window to get the woman's attention. The woman seemed to ignore him, and just as he was about to knock harder, she stood, and vacated her seat. Naruto groaned in annoyance, his head sagging to hide his features. Excuse me. Naruto lifted his head, and came face to face with a busty woman that reminded him of that pretty blonde from K. Yumo. Take a number, and a time travel specialist will be right with you, dear. Trying not to stare at her rather generous bust, which was currently flashing more cleavage than the Mizukage and Tsunade Bachin combined, Naruto took a number, and found that it was in the way upper millions. Glancing over, he saw a sign that said, now serving number 1506. He was going to be a while. Now the giant flea shelter's comment about do-overs makes more sense. Moving over to a couch near a table that had several magazines and manga, Naruto sat heavily with a sigh, and prepared to wait. Next to him, a small red fox hopped up onto his shoulder, took a look at his number, and groaned. And here I thought they'd have gotten some faster employees after that last incident. Shrugging, it added, well, best get comfortable, you're going to be here a while. What do you mean, last incident? Naruto asked. You've been here before. Of course, I'm the almighty Kyuubi, I can travel back in time anytime I want. It replied. You've been here too, brat, but you just don't remember it. Glad I fixed that little issue with the jutsu. My chakra mixing with his was also what kept us connected, and was why I kept getting sent back with him. And since he's taken control of it, that connection is finally severed. With me not attached to him, hopefully I can get sent somewhere more interesting. Little did the fox know that he was definitely going to be sent somewhere interesting. As a matter of fact, he was soon to be headed to feudal Japan, where he'd be spending a lot of time with a certain dog Hanyu, the bitchy reincarnation of a sexy priestess, a perverted monk, and a kunoichi with sibling issues. Finally glancing at the table for something to do, Naruto looked down to find a manga with his picture on it. Picking it up in curiosity, he opened to a random page, and began to read, only to drop the book when he found the details of his mission to Wave so detailed in the book. Excuse me, he called. What the hell is this? Grr, Melvin, you idiot. A young man said to himself, as he had a manga shoved in his face by the very person on the front of the book. If there was one thing that had been drilled into them, it was that manga with characters capable of high-level Ime travel were never to find manga about themselves in the waiting rooms, because it would make the standard memory adjustments during the send-back process completely useless. Well, it's too late now. I'll just have to make sure that Melvin knows to alert the proper people about his screw-up. The man began to promptly tell him all about his life, compliment him on all of his accomplishments, and even went on a rant about how Sasuke was a bastard that didn't deserve to be saved, and Sakura wasn't worth his time, considering the former had betrayed the village out of jealousy, and the latter had eventually been tricked into betraying him out of some misplaced love, only to be murdered after she'd helped Sasuke severely weaken him. He didn't need to be told. Eventually, the young man began going on about fanfiction, and even showed him to a computer where he could find some. Naruto was shown a popular fanfiction site, as well as a site that allowed one to read the entire Naruto series. After what felt like months, and after reading the entire Naruto series, which he found differed in several places from what he remembered, and numerous fanfiction, his favorite authors being Naruto's brat, because the guy got him laid pretty often, and with hot Kunoichi, Sarah 1281, because she was funny as all hell, Mountain Wind, he'd gotten him laid with Hinata, Tenten, 2 hot OCs, and Tsunade, 3 of them all at once, and Desiran WSDM, the guy was just good. Naruto finally had some semblance of what he was going to do when he went back. He was going to take a page out of the crackfic genre, and have some fun. Konoha beware. First though, he needed to have something of a failsafe so that he didn't accidentally screw something up. He wouldn't be able to have any fun if he changed a bunch of major things, and lost his advantage. Getting onto the computer in the waiting room, he took the set of instructions from the tech guy, and typed them into the computer, creating the editing file that he needed. Once he was done, he copied the URL, and opened a search engine. A quick trip to FF.net, an even quicker sign-in, and a visit to his favorites page got him the user profile he wanted. 888. Out beyond the fourth wall. A certain fanfiction author, we'll call him Naruto's brat for now, was checking his email, when he noticed that he had a PM from someone Ed the real Naruto. Opening the email, he found a rather interesting note. The note revealed that the sender was Naruto Uzumaki from Konoha. NB snickered at the silly person who would go so far in his imagination, and that he was in need of help. There was also a link in the message that would supposedly explain everything. NB naturally didn't trust links like that, but given that it would be fairly easy to report the profile from another computer should it be spam or a virus, NB clicks on the link. Almost as soon as he clicks it, something begins downloading onto his computer. When the download finished, a window popped up, and he had to stop himself from going into a convulsive twitch. There, on his screen, was a guy, who exactly resembled what he remembered a 16-year-old Naruto Uzumaki to look like, sitting in a waiting room. Okay, this is fucking freaky. NB said, staring in shock at the young man. He'd seen cosplayers before, but this was insanely accurate to the point of impossible. Not to mention, he didn't think a cosplayer could pull off the cartoon look. Hey, Naruto's brat, the man nodded. Glad you came through. I don't think I have enough time to send this message to someone else. Now if you can see me, then it means the connection was a success. Naruto explained. What has happened, is that Kyuubi has used a space-time jutsu to send us back in time. Because of certain other events, I have become aware of the fourth wall. And you are going to be my connection to the other side. By clicking on the link, you're now connected to a seal the fox helped me create that will allow us to communicate, and you to make changes when I get back. With your help, I plan to make things interesting, like in crackfix, and prevent certain people from succumbing to certain severe bouts of stupidity. The little box in the bottom right corner of your screen, is where you will help me make the changes for things. Think of it like a fanfiction that you're helping one of the characters write. Just click on the Help button for further instructions. Now my number is almost up, and I need you to send me back to a specific time. Quote, now serving number 987,654,321. The busty clerk called. Alright, I'm up, let's go to work. Naruto walked up to the desk, and whispered. I sent you a PM telling you what I want done first, so don't forget. As the little window went blank, NB stared for a moment more, before opening the help menu, and checking the first of the changes Naruto wanted to make. After all, it wasn't the weirdest thing to ever happen to him, and given some of the stories he'd written and posted, and some of the ideas he street ill had for others, well, this was technically normal. After a few moments, a sudden sinister smile crossed his face. This could be fun. 888. 7 years before intended arrival day, IAD. As soon as Naruto arrived, he was forced to hide. He'd forgotten to give more specific instructions on when and where he'd wanted to arrive, not knowing the exact date, just that it was on Hinata's birthday, which he was ashamed to admit that he didn't know, so NB had sent him back to his own apartment nearly a week before. Unfortunately, this was also the same day that his new apartment had been vandalized by a bunch of crazy villagers. Applying a quick henge, Naruto slipped through the crowd of vandals, knocking one particular one over that was attempting to set fire to some of his things. "Hey Ninja-san, are we supposed to be burning stuff?" he asked, holding up the lighter the man had. The ninja took one look at the lighter, and the man responsible, before motioning for 2 other people there to escort him out of the building. Naruto was surprised at that. Smashing his stuff was okay, but burning it was wrong. Then again, he had heard about a guy being arrested a few days later for arson. Anyway, Naruto slipped out of the apartment, and headed out into the village. After a few hours of subtle questioning, he'd found out that the fighting between Kumo and Konoha shinobi had finally ceased, and that a delegation would be coming to sign a treaty in 4 days. Great, I've got 4 days to kill. Naruto thought. I wonder if I can prank the Uchiha one time really good before my other appointment. 888. It was getting harder each day to avoid the merger that the Continuum wanted to force with 2 Narutos living in the same time and universe. He knew that he should merge, his bodily instincts were telling him to merge, but it wasn't something that he could do just yet, it wasn't time. The seal he'd placed on himself, he grudgingly had to thank the fox for that helped, but it wasn't going to hold for much longer. Luckily for him, today was the day he'd been waiting for. The day when he would fix one of the more annoying problems he'd have to deal with. Naruto walked through the forest whistling a jaunty little tune he'd learned from the Kyuubi. Pop Goes the Weasel was rather fitting for what he planned to do. As he felt the chakra signature approaching, he began to hum. Dum da dum da 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 dum, da dum da dum da dum dum, dum da dum da 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 dum. Naruto balled his hand into a tight fist. THOOMP. Goes Ida Kai. Naruto sang as he slammed his fist into the man's gut, knocking the air from his lungs. The man dropped the bag that carried Hinata as all the air he thought he owned left in an instant. A swift chop to the neck, and he was out like a light. Naruto then swiftly used his shapeshift jutsu. Kyuubi's pride wouldn't allow him to call his upgraded henge a transformation to change into his 4-year-old self. Naruto strolled over, and freed Hinata, grinning at the frightened girl. "Hiya, I'm Naruto, purty." To his shock and surprise, Hinata flew into his arms, sobbing and clutching him tightly. It was about this time that Hiashi Hyuga came upon the scene, finding his daughter clutching to the villag. Ipariah as if her life depended on it, and the man who'd kidnapped her laying unconscious on the ground. He was tempted to kill the man for this insult, but decided that since he was already incapacitated, it would be best to hand him over to the Anbu that his brother had summoned. Naruto noticed the man, and pulling Hinata away from him, pointed her to the direction of her father. Hiashi found himself suddenly holding onto his daughter's crying form, though he was inwardly impressed with the strength she was holding onto his leg. He gave a sad sigh, before looking up at the boy that had undoubtedly rescued his daughter, only to find he'd disappeared. What Hiashi didn't know, was that Naruto had released the seal, and NB had restarted the time travel process. Because of the pit stop, Naruto wouldn't be able to go back as far as he wanted, but he should be able to go back to just after he'd failed the academy exam, and take care of a few problems. What Naruto didn't realize, was that his actions would have further reaching effects than he'd planned. Nothing serious, but something that would definitely be beneficial to him in the future. The incident allowed Konoha to gain another concession out of the treaty, namely one of their Jinchuriki teaching Naruto how to control the Kyuubi's power once he learned of the burden. 888. Well, here's the start of something that will probably have more flames than the Chicago fire of 1871. Because this is just going to be a ridiculous cliché-bashing story, feel free to add comments, or send ideas, especially for the many shunshuns of Naruto. If they're good, they may make an appearance if we can spin them enough. You will be credited at the beginning for your contributions, so join the fun, and help make this thing as insane as it can be. Naruto arrived at probably one of the most inopportune times he could have. Hanging from some, admittedly now, thin ropes in front of the Yondaime's face with a paintbrush in hand. He'd have liked to have gone back further, but at least this would still give him a chance to take another crack at that bastard Mizuki. He couldn't wait to see the look on that bastard's face when he passed his exam. With a grin on his face, Naruto tossed the paint can down into the crowd of people, then made the hand seal for the shunshin. Before realizing that he wasn't supposed to know that jutsu yet. If that many people, and several of them were shinobi who'd recognize the technique, saw him use that technique, it could land him in trouble, as well as having him brought forth to answer questions he'd rather not. Grabbing onto the ropes, Naruto began climbing back up, just as he heard Iruka yell out. Shit. Busted. 888. Naruto sat on the floor of the academy classroom, again tied up, and cursing the forced deja vu. He petulantly listened to Iruka's rant about him failing the graduation exam twice already, never realizing that he was practically replaying the same scene almost to the letter, but for different reasons. It wasn't until Iruka yelled for everyone to line up for a henge test, did Naruto really start to pay attention. As Naruto waited in line for his turn, he was having a fierce internal debate. To Waroke or not to Waroke, that is the question. Naruto thought sagely. That sounded familiar, but I can't seem to place it for some reason. It's Shakespeare, doofus. A voice in his head said. And I think you should definitely Waroke, only make it better. Waroke into Iruka. Iruka noticed the rather devious grin on Naruto's face, and while he didn't know why, he became incredibly fearful of the blonde. Knowing there was nothing for it, he called the blonde to the front, and awaited Naruto's performance. Placing his hands in the seal for transformation, Naruto called upon his chakra, which was far more than an E-rank genjutsu, ninjutsu hybrid required. Was it his fault that he'd missed the lecture that explained that henge was a genjutsu, ninjutsu hybrid, and not a full-on ninjutsu? No, it was the fault of the boy who'd hit him in the face with a spitball, and when he reacted in shock, it was the bigoted teacher's fault for tossing him out for disruption without even trying to find out what really happened. Thankfully for everyone's sense of justice, both the culprit and the teacher found themselves spending a lot of time on the toilet the next day, without toilet paper. Anyway, as I was saying before, Naruto called upon more chakra than he needed for the jutsu. You know, one would think that given everything, he'd have learned at some point to properly perform the jutsu, especially when Tsunade and Jiraiya found out that his henge wasn't normal, and I'm rambling again. Sorry, back to the story. With a cry of henge, Naruto performed the jutsu. The figure that emerged from the smoke both shocked, in a good way, and horrified Iruka. There, standing in front of him, was himself. Only as an extremely sexy woman. From the hairstyle, the height, the similar, but more slight build, even to his facial scar, everything was there, and added to it was an hourglass figure, a very pleasant bust of a very nice size, wide, round hips, and from what he could see, likely a very plump. Firm behind as well. Poor Iruka would be traumatized when the fact that he'd gotten a rocket nosebleed from seeing himself as a woman finally registered later that evening. Naruto had just turned back when Iruka hopped back to his feet, and one big head no jutsu later, Naruto had been chastised for creating, as Iruka put it, stupid skills. And yes, you could tell from his tone that the two words were indeed capitalized. Things after that continued the same as they had before, with Naruto grumbling at the fact that he couldn't use the Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu to help clean the mess. Again, that would bring about unwanted questions. While he planned to use the jutsu for his graduation exam, that could be played off as that being how he'd been taught to use the jutsu, which wasn't far from the truth. 888. The next day found Naruto sitting in the back of the room awaiting his turn to take the exam. He was ready this time around, and wasn't bothered in the least about the Bunshin being on the test. When Hinata, who gave him a look of worry when the exam was announced, caught his eye, Naruto merely winked at her, causing her to look away rapidly, and her face to redden. Naruto had to admit, Hinata was rather adorable when she blushed. Naruto's mind wandered back to his previous life, and the woman that she'd blossomed into, and Naruto couldn't help wondering how stupid he'd been ignoring her or Sakura. Yeah, not this time around, that was for sure. Naruto thought. Although, I should probably wait until after training with Ero Sennin, because dating her right now would make me feel like my pervert teacher. A dirty old man. It was nearly a half hour later when Naruto heard his name called. Standing from his seat, Naruto headed down the stairs in the classroom, passing closely by Hinata, and brushing against her shoulder. Hearing the girl squeak in surprise and he just knew her face was beet red, Naruto grinned, and made for the next room. Alright Naruto, create 3 Bunshin, and you'll finally pass. Iruka said. Naruto gave a confident grin, put his hand in the cross ram seal, and while performing his signature technique, called out, Bunshin no Jutsu. Much like his Bunshin, the Kage Bunshin that formed was just as useless. What? Why didn't that work? I'm sorry, Naruto, but you fail, again. Iruka said, his face filled with remorse. Ah, come on Iruka-sensei, I could do it the last time I tried it. Which was true, even if he hadn't used the jutsu since coming back. Give him a break, Iruka-sensei. Mizuki said, it's his 3rd time, and he did technically create a clone. Quote, I'm sorry, Mizuki, but it wouldn't be fair to the others. Iruka said, everyone else divided into 3, and all Naruto managed to create was a single clone, and even that clone was useless. I can't let him pass. Quote, as soon as he left the exam room, he went back into the classroom, grabbed a piece of chalk from the board, began going over his seal knowledge, because that was one of his biggest assets later, even as limited as it was. Naruto ignored the looks he was getting from the other members of his class, especially the ones who could partially see what it was he was writing on the board. To his surprise, his technique and memory was flawless. Quickly erasing the board, he went to an open window, and tried to perform a simple ending. Again, nothing happened. So anything with mostly theoretical application, like seals, I can still do, but physical things like my jutsu, I can't. Damn it, that means all of my hard-earned chakra control is gone again. Face distraught at the last thought, Naruto exited the classroom, then the building, then headed over to the small playground, and took up his seat on the swing. So, I noticed that you're having some trouble with your jutsu. NB's voice sounded in his head. Is that a part of the time travel? Naruto thought back. Or are you pranking me by making me learn everything over? Single quote. That's part of the time travel. NB said. You weren't even supposed to come back with your memories of the future, but that would kind of ruin the fun if that happened, right? That's true. So I have to relearn everything I knew? Naruto asked, annoyed. Yes and no. NB said. I was able to alter some things so you wouldn't have to start completely over. As you probably noticed with the Fuinjutsu, you have all the theory knowledge you had from before, but you have to reteach your body to perform the nin and taijutsu you haven't learned yet in canon, though only if you want access to it before you're supposed to learn it. After that, it'll be just like before. You're also the same power level strength, speed, chakra, etc. as your previous canon self, Since it didn't return with you, but since you're still knowledgeable of your future training methods, you can use those to help speed up the process this time. Thank God for the fourth wall. Naruto said, rubbing his hands together. I can't wait to have some fun with that. About that, I gave you some restrictions regarding the fourth wall. Only a certain amount of changes per arc, although I might interfere if needed. In his mind, he added. With the exception of certain extremely cheating even by ninja standards members of the Akatsuki. Why I can't believe that you gave me restrictions. Naruto raged to NB. Just because you have a large amount of influence on things now, doesn't make you a kami. Besides, it'll attract suspicion if people think you're suddenly too strong after being a dunce for most of your shinobi life. Quote, Naruto couldn't deny that. He certainly didn't want to attract more negative attention from the fangirls and villagers for being better and stronger than Sasuke. Nor did he want to attract the interest of that creepy bastard Danzo. Sure, the guy loved Konoha, and was extremely loyal, but Naruto didn't like his methods of operation. Also, I want to make sure that you don't get reliant on this like certain bastards got reliant on their bloodlines. Naruto grumbled, but acknowledged the point. He just had to bring up that bastard to win an argument. Besides, the restrictions make it interesting, and the changes should mostly be used for emergencies. As I said, it'll help teach you some responsibility and wise decision making. You'll need that when you become Hokage. Great, I had to pick the one fucking author who wants me to learn life lessons while I'm having fun. Naruto grumbled. I knew I should have went with Silver Fang or Sketchfin. They'd have let me do what I want. Yeah, but would they have been able to come up with some of the stuff that we plan on doing later? Quote, well no, but that's only because they're normal, sane people, and you're a sick, twisted bastard. Hey, this sick, twisted bastard got you laid. NB argued. And with several girls I know you wanted to, as well. Quote, true, but you also made me do my mom and Hinata's little sister. Faye, your mom is hot, and $50 says Hinata's sister wants to do you by the time she turns 16. Another 20 says she pursues you if you're still single. And another 20 after that says she shares you with Hinata if she's still single. Naruto decided not to comment on that, as the only versions of Hanabi he knew, and had seen, were the precocious, 7-year-old, and the too grown up for her own good, 10-year-old. Naruto was just about to ask about something, when he was interrupted from his thoughts by Mizuki. As he sat on the roof of his apartment with Mizuki, Naruto mostly ignored the man's ramblings about Iruka. He was telling Naruto things about his father figure that he already knew, and it was almost insulting for Mizuki to think he was more knowledgeable about Iruka than he himself was. It wasn't until Mizuki mentioned that there was another, secret graduation test did Naruto actually listen to him. It was another 10 minutes before we found Naruto sneaking through the Hokage's home. Even with all of a Junin's skill in stealth, it was damn near impossible to sneak up on the old man. While this wasn't the case with Naruto, there was still something nostalgic about hitting his Jiji with the Waro. Naruto, what are you doing in my home? Hands in the seal for his, not henge, Naruto called. Waroke no jutsu, Tsunade centerfold. When the smoke cleared away, there standing before the Sandame was the form of his very busty female student. Like a daughter she may be to him, Sarutobi was still a man who could appreciate the physical attributes of the beautiful woman that she grew into. The next few seconds found the venerable Hokage known as the professor laying on the ground, a blood splatter on the wall, and a small puddle dripping from his nose. Further sneaking found Naruto the forbidden scroll, and after strapping it over his back, he climbed out a window, and took off to place Mizuki had told him he was to meet his examiner. Once he arrived, Naruto opened the scroll, and began to read the instructions for his favorite jutsu. This time, he takes the time to fully peruse the jutsu's instructions, before performing the jutsu. After he'd finished, and realized just how awesome, and how much potential the jutsu had in his Han. DS, Naruto formed the familiar seal. Hoping that it worked, he gathered his chakra, and tried to create 10 Bunshin. He got 13. Oh well, at least it works now. Naruto said, I'll just have to work on my chakra control. Quote. He was about to roll the scroll back up, before a sudden thought struck him. He had the time, he may as well learn another jutsu. A quick perusal found another interesting technique, the Bunshin Bakua. Knowing that trying to learn that technique at the moment, and the numerous explosions that would result, would bring about his discovery faster than he could learn it. Creating a few Bunshin, he had one henge into a blank scroll, and another henge into an ink pot. He then copied the instructions for the Bunshin Bakua. Once he was done, he handed everything to one of the extra clones that had come, and told him to head back to the apartment and copy it on a real scroll. And make sure the inkpot isn't dispelled before you finish, or the ink will disappear too. Naruto told the clone. Nodding, the clone hopped away to his assigned task. After that had been taken care of, Naruto opened the scroll even further, and began studying the last technique on the scroll. The one detailing the jutsu that sealed the fox inside him until the others arrived. Now since I'm sure everyone reading this is pretty much familiar with what happens next, I won't bother you with the details. With the exception of Naruto not reacting to being told he was Kyuubi, nothing really changed. It wasn't until Mizuki had Iruka cornered that things got interesting. I had planned to kill you later, but I've changed my mind. Mizuki said, spinning his giant shuriken. Just die. As the Chunin charged, Iruka gave a slight smirk, ready to face his death. He knew that Mizuki wouldn't get the scroll. Naruto was better at evading people than most of the ninja in the village. 2 meters from death, a shadow intervened, kneeing Mizuki in the chin. As Mizuki was knocked backwards from the strength of the blow, the shuriken flew off into the woods, lodging into the chest of the surprised root ninja who'd been spying on the scene taking place. Struggling to his feet, Mizuki glared before growling. You shouldn't have done that. Naruto glared right back. Touch Iruka-sensei, and I'll kill you. And unlike the first time he'd said it, Naruto felt he could go through with it this time. You idiot, why'd you come back? Iruka shouted. You should have just run away. Hey, a little punk like you, I'll kill you in one shot. Mizuki boasted. Not if I deal with you first. Naruto returned, bringing his hand into a very familiar seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. And suddenly, Mizuki wasn't feeling so bold anymore. There was orange all over the place. In the clearing, in the surrounding forest, up in the trees, everywhere. What's going on? Quote. What's wrong, Tem? The Narutos teased. I thought you were going to kill me with one shot. Fine, if you're not going to. With that, an orange-clad figure darted forward, and kneed Mizuki in the chin. 3 more slid beneath him, and kicked him into the air, while a final clone springboarded off the first one's head into the air. With a triumphant yell, he performed the same move he'd used on Kiba in the Chunin exams. But Naruto wasn't quite done with Mizuki yet. Oh no, that bastard had more coming for sabotaging his taijutsu education. While this was going on, all of the other clones had jumped into the air, and performed a mass henge. What appeared was a giant pair of hands performing the tiger seal. This seal then began a rapid descent towards the ground, aiming directly for a particularly vulnerable spot that just so happened to be poking up in the air after Naruto's team attack. Iruka gave a pained wince as the attack hit home, and vowed to castrate Kakashi on principle alone. Senin Garashi. He thought. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, especially not the way Naruto just used it. Single quote. Hehe. Oops. Naruto said, but his tone was completely unapologetic. And thus, Naruto once again graduated under suspicious circumstances. 888. The next day, as Naruto was turning in his completed registration form, the meeting was interrupted by a small child barging into the room. Fight me, old man. The brat yelled, before tripping over his own, overly long scarf. Naruto sighed. He's not even my apprentice yet, and he's already embarrassing me. Naruto thought. The next moment, the boy jumped to his feet, looked around the room, and pointed at Naruto. You tripped me. He yelled. You set up some kind of trap. No, you tripped over your scarf, or possibly your own feet. No way, it's your fault. Konohamaru yelled. Just when I'd gotten the drop on him, and had him beat, you go and ruin things for me. Quote, you really think you can beat him? Naruto asked Konohamaru, already knowing the answer. Yup. Naruto couldn't help the snort of laughter that came. Let me put this into perspective for you, runt. Sarutobi almost choked on his pipe hearing such a large word come from Naruto, but smiled knowing that he was at least smarter than he'd feared given the boy's poor academic performance. I could beat you with my eyes closed and one hand tied behind my back. You could probably hold your breath for 10 times the length of time it would take Gigi to beat me. You haven't got a chance right now, so stop being stupid. The last 4 words were punctuated by Naruto bopping the kid on the skull, much like Sakura and Tsunade had been fond of doing to him. He then rounded on Ebisu. And you, me? The man asked, pointing at himself. How dare you call yourself an elite tutor putting ideas like that in his head? There are no shortcuts to becoming Hokage, any ninja worth their shit knows that. If this is the kind of stuff you're going to be teaching kids, I hope you never make Junin and get a genin squad of your own. They'd end up getting themselves killed on a stinking D rank with you leading them. So shocked was Ebisu at Naruto's declaration, that he didn't notice that Naruto had walked up to him, until he felt a searing pain in his shin. Dummy. 888. Walking down the streets of Konoha, Naruto couldn't help the growl that came from him. That fucking idiot is going to get those 3 killed, I just know it. Naruto raged. Well, screw this, I'm not letting that happen. I'm going to get myself promoted at the Chunin exams, and then I'm going to become a Junin, so that I can get them as my own squad. Naruto suddenly felt something on the edge of his senses. Speak of the little devil. Turning to the section of the fence where the wood ran horizontal instead of vertical, Naruto spoke. You know, if you're going to use that technique, you should probably get the directions of the wood right. The curtain fell. Ha! I knew you'd see through my disguise. Konohamaru said. I'll make you my boss. With you teaching me, I'll definitely become the Hokage. So please teach me the sexy jutsu you used to defeat my grandpa. Quote, you remember what I said about there being no shortcuts to Hokage, right? Naruto asked. Yeah, boss, but making grandpa pass out with a nosebleed seems like it would be funny. The boy answered. Naruto found that he couldn't disagree there. Okay, I'll teach you. Naruto said. Just don't do it too often. He's old, and you don't wanna accidentally hurt him too bad, right? Konohamaru shook his head. So how come you were so determined to defeat Gigi, and becomes Hokage? Quote, no one ever calls me by my name. Konohamaru grumbled. Everyone always addresses me as the Hokage's grandson, and they always give me special treatment because of it. That kind of sucks. Naruto said. Well, come on, let's go get you learned up. First though, we're gonna have to borrow one of those pervy books, so you can get an idea of what kind of girl you want to change into. And the corruption began. 888. Hey Naruto, exclaimed random genin number 5 who would never amount to more than a filler character. Only those that passed are supposed to be here. Yes, well, Mizuki decided to turn traitor, and steal the forbidden scroll. Naruto said. I helped apprehend him, and learned the Kage Bunshin, which is like the Academy Jutsu on steroids. The Hokage decided to give me a field promotion. The boy's retort was interrupted by another voice. Excuse me, Sakura said. Will you let me through? The boy moved, and Sakura bore down on him. Naruto, move your I want to sit on the other side of you. Hey, why the hell did you ask him nicely, but then yell at me? Naruto asked. Shut up, Sakura yelled, hitting him in the head. Naruto barely winced at the strike, and had to hid a grin when Sakura shook her hand a bit in pain. You know what? Forget it. Naruto said as Naruto was about to get up. I had a nightmare last night about today. He said. Long story short, something happened dealing with his fangirls. Sasuke and I ended up face to face glaring at each other. Someone bumped into me, which then resulted in me kissing the Tem. Just in case something like that happens for real, I'm sitting next to Hinata, so that I'll at least end up kissing someone I want to. Eep. Thud. Needless to say, Hinata lost consciousness, and her face was very red. Ah, she's so cute when she does that. As Naruto watched, almost feeling sorry for the bastard, Ino came in, and a fight between the two biggest fangirls broke out. Unable to take the squabbling any longer, and curious as to what it was about Sasuke they liked, Naruto spoke up. Okay, someone please explain to me why it is that you like Sasuke, again. Naruto asked. Because he's so dark and mysterious, he's really handsome, he's a great ninja, he's all aloof and cool, and he seems so in need of love, but keeps stubbornly pushing everyone away. Sakura said. Or maybe you're all just in denial of the fact that he wants absolutely nothing to do with any of you, and doesn't consider any of you worth his time. The outcry of anger that resulted from this comment made Naruto shake his head. He just doesn't want to get close to people after what happened to his family. Ino said. He's so great. God, I feel like such a fucking moron. Naruto said. Ino looked to comment, but was cut off when he continued. I've been an orphan my whole life, and had the entire village hate me and treat me like garbage for things beyond my control. Do you mean to tell me that if I wanted someone to care for me and love me, then instead of foolishly trying to get attention and be accepted, I should have been trying to ush people away and isolate myself? I'll admit, I might not have the emo or handsome thing going for me so much, but I've got just as good a sob story as Sasuke Tem does. And unlike him, mine actually involves my life being in danger. Every year, on my birthday, no less. Sasuke-kun's life was in danger. Random fangirl number 13 cried. His brother was so strong, Sasuke was so brave for facing him. Not brave, stupid. Naruto thought. Even I wouldn't go after Itachi, and I beat Pain. I doubt it. Naruto said. Itachi killed the best the clan had to offer with ease, so I highly doubt he felt at all threatened by Tem, and there were kids younger than Sasuke there, so it wasn't because he was just a kid. If Itachi had truly intended to kill Sasuke, he'd have done it, so I highly doubt Sasuke's life was ever in any real danger. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. As much as he hated to admit it, the Dobi did make some sense. So why did Itachi spare him? Well, you're still not a great ninja like Sasuke-kun. Ino taunted. For his age you mean? Naruto said. Great ninja in general tend to have made names for themselves outside of their village, and tend to have AS rankings in the bingo book. Ino stuck her tongue out at him. And I might not be the best ninja, but I figure that being able to use a Junin level jutsu as easily as I can, as well as being able to evade and outwit Anbu dressed in bright orange, should be worth something. Quote. Yeah right, Naruto, like you could outwit Anbu. Ino said, rolling her eyes. Actually, if you ask any Anbu that's been there for at least a year, I'm sure they'll have some interesting stories to tell you. A voice suddenly interrupted. I remember a certain incident with laxatives and a lack of toilet tissue. I still say I'd have gotten away if a certain old geezer hadn't tripped me up. A clearing of the throat brought attention to the Hokage. Oops. Sorry Gigi. He was suddenly chastised by half a dozen people yelling at him to respect the Hokage. Whatever. So, what are you doing here? Isn't Iruka-sensei supposed to be giving out our team assignments? Quote. Iruka. Ahem. One of our special Junin decided to, help Iruka on his road to recovery last night, and he's not going to make it. Naruto snickered at the Hokage's red face. Already. The reply that he received made it difficult for him to keep a straight face. He couldn't disagree, though. Iruka really needed to get laid, and Anko did have a crush on him, so why not? Now take your seats, I'm going to read off your teams. The teams are as follows. 888. Naruto, having just decided on a filling lunch of Ichiraku ramen, could be found headed in the directie on of the small stand. He'd stayed behind, and talked to the Hokage about possibly getting a change of team, maybe to Kurenai's team, he could easily replace Kiba. Unfortunately, his reasons for wanting the switch, Sasuke being a bastard, Sakura being annoying, and wanting to have easier access to his new hobby of making Hinata blush, weren't enough to get him the change he wanted. As he made his way to Ichiraku's, he spotted Sakura several meters ahead, sitting on a bench across from a small stand that specialized in onigiri. Remembering what happened this day in his first life, Naruto decided that now might be a good time to start Sakura down the road of healing. With a quick dip behind a bush, and an even quicker henge, Naruto came back out, and continued his stroll. As he came upon the girl, he heard her voice. Sasuke-kun. Sakura called. Would you like to join me for lunch? I accidentally ordered too much. Naruto looked at the portion, and had to fight back a groan. The order was barely fit for a child of Konohamaru's size, and it was obvious that she had barely touched it. Sakura, he replied dully. He then inwardly shivered. Being so emo and emotionless left you with a creepy feeling. You're so smart, that you're stupid. Sakura's look of shock was priceless. Stop starving yourself, it's sickening. And stop chasing me, and go after someone that actually wants to be with you before they lose interest and you end up alone. With that, Naruto continued his stroll down the street to his favorite restaurant. Sasuke-kun. Sakura asked his retreating back. What was that? Inner Sakura yelled. I think he wants me to go out with Naruto. Inner Sakura was silent in disbelief, before something occurred to her. Wait, you think Sasuke-kun might have been testing us? She asked. You know, to see if we'd be loyal to him. Like if we'd betray him for another boy, or if we really loved him. Quote, you're right, Sakura said, aloud, scaring a small girl who was walking past. Well, I'm not going to stray. Don't worry Sasuke-kun, you're the only man for us, Shanaru. Yep, she really needs to stop listening to that inner persona. She totally missed the point on that one. 888. Kakashi snickered to himself as he strolled leisurely down the hallway. Stopping outside the door, he listened in for a little bit, before announcing himself. Grr. Where is he? Sakura groused. He's like 3 hours late, and Naruto's not even back yet either. Where is that moron? Curiosity getting the better of him, Kakashi entered the room, and sure enough there were only 2 genin sitting in the room. After reading your files, my first impression would have been that I didn't like you guys. Kakashi said. But since you've managed to lose a teammate before you even started as a team, I'm going to amend my opinion. You guys suck. Meet me on the roof. With that, Kakashi shunshined away, planning on having a Kage Bunshin search for his wayward pupil. Imagine his shock, when upon reaching the roof of the building, he found his student already waiting for him, casually munching on a bowl of ramen. Once the other 2 arrived, Sakura immediately stomped over, and punched her wayward teammate for not coming back on time. Here I was thinking that you might like some alone time with your precious Sasuke-kun. Naruto returned. HMPH, last time I tried to be nice to you. Sakura had the good grace to look ashamed, but quickly played it off. Well, now that we're all here, how about introductions? Kakashi said. You know, likes, dislikes, hobbies, dreams for the future. Sensei, why don't you go first? Sakura asked. Show us what to do. Fine, my name is Kakashi Hatake, Kakashi was startled to find the spiel he'd been so looking forward to delivering interrupted. Ika Ika Paradise, specifically Chapter 6, Annoying Guy Sensei, being late just to annoy people, and making up ridiculous excuses for why you're late. You dislike what happened to your father, Danzo for spearheading the scandal that followed, and the fact that Obito was killed saving your hobbies include reading Ika Ika in public just to piss people off, and taunting Guy Sensei. Your dreams for the future are to see Ika Ika made into a movie, and maybe star in one opposite Yukie Fujika's. Kakashi I smiled, but inwardly was a little wary of the blonde. How had anyone been able to figure out so much about him, especially the part about Yukie? You seem to know an awful lot about me. Kakashi said. May I ask how? I did my research. Naruto said. A person can get a lot done with a couple dozen Kage Bunshin and 3 hours to kill. Not to mention, there are a lot of annoyed people willing to give up the dirt about you. Quote, since you want to be so cheeky, why don't you go next? Naruto shrugged. You all already know who I am. I like ramen, training, how cute Hinata-chan gets when she blushes, and gardening to an extent. I used to like Sakura, but then I realized that I'm not into masochism. I dislike arrogant emo bastards, people who look down on others, people who judge prematurely, fangirls who starve themselves because they're trying to keep thin, while foolishly putting their teammates in danger because they aren't gaining any muscle tone that is crucial to being a shinobi. I also dislike late sensei who obsess over one student, and ignore their others. Most importantly, I dislike the 3 minutes it takes to cook instant ramen. My hobbies include taking care of my plant, learning about seals, and trying new flavors of ramen at Ichiraku. My dreams for the future: prevent Sasuke from betraying Konoha for vengeance, prevent Sakura from betraying Konoha for Sasuke, and to not get prematurely killed again. After that, maybe I'll marry Hinata and have a bunch of kids, and become Hokage. Naruto thought all of this, but decided to just keep things as simple as possible. You already know who I am. I like stuff, and I dislike stuff, but that's not important. My new hobby is seeing how much I can make Hinata-chan blush, and I hope to marry my cute little Hina-chan and become Hokage one day. Naruto inwardly smirked, enjoying the shocked scowl on Sasuke's face, the look of annoyed betrayal on Kakashi's, and the combo of shocked and betrayed on Sakura's. Huff why she sported the latter expression, he didn't know. Naruto mostly tuned out the rest of the meeting, already knowing what was going to happen, only paying enough attention to comment on the introductions. Why am I not at all surprised? After Sakura's rant resulted in his having to dodge her fist. Being betrayed by the girl had taken a lot of the shine out of Sakura that had been there, and he couldn't help the feeling of annoyance at the girl she used to be, and how often she took swings at him. For no apparent reason. We'll skip what he said to Sasuke, but suffice it to say, he had to dodge Sakura's fist again. Once they'd been dismissed, again he took great happiness out of watching Sakura and Sasuke's reactions to the bell test. Naruto decided now was as good a time as any to lay some foundation. Okay, since we're a team now, I think it prudent that we establish some ground rules. At their shocked looks, Naruto rolled his eyes. Rule number 1, I don't care how cool your fangirls think it makes you look, Sasuke, while we're on duty, no brooding about your brother. Do that shit on your own time. Rule number 2, I don't care how you feel about Sasuke, Sakura, no fangirling while we're on duty. Obsessing over Sasuke when you're supposed to be paying attention to a mission can get us killed. Glaring, Sakura interrupted. Rule number 3, Naruto, no more asking me out on dates. She gave him a smirk, to which he shrugged. That's fine. Naruto said, I'd rather date Hinata anyway. He missed the look of utter shock and hurt when he turned to Sasuke. Is that all? Sasuke growled. I have some training to do. Naruto shrugged, and the broody boy left. You know, as much as he thinks about Itachi, one might mistake him for having a brother complex. Naruto leaned back to avoid a swing from Sakura. Rule number 4, no more trying to hit me for stupid reasons that only make sense to yourself. 888. Grr. Where are they? Sakura yelled. He told us to be here at 8, and he's almost 3 hours late. Quote. Yo. Kakashi said. You're late. Sakura screamed. Kakashi was about to reply, but noticed that he was missing a genin. Looks like we're missing someone. It was at this point that Naruto arrived via the tree line from another training ground where he'd been working on regaining his raw control, and where about 3 dozen clones were still trying to either stick leaves to their foreheads, or climb a tree. "You're late, Naruto," Sakura screamed, only to receive a grin from the blonde, who then proceeded to turn and look at Kakashi as he answered. "Sorry I'm late, but I got lost on a train of thought, and missed my stop." Kakashi's mouth dropped open as Sakura screamed. Liar. Not only had the Gaki stolen his introduction, but he stole his thing. And even had a better excuse. It would seem that he was going to have a talk with his student about gimmick infringement. 888. As Naruto hid from his sensei, he couldn't help but chuckle. He'd been the only one to eat breakfast, just as he knew he would be. As he sat in the tree, watching Kakashi stand there, he couldn't help but feel a deep-seated desire to try and fight Kakashi. When an image of Kakashi in the Senengarashi pose, and not himself, but Sasuke flying through the air, he knew where the desire came from. Kakashi stood in the clearing, his face not showing it, but he was very wary. He could sense Sasuke hiding in a tree on one side of the clearing, and Sakura hiding beneath a bush. Naruto had just disappeared. He'd been on a few of the early Naruto chases, and had to admit the boy had talent in stealth and evasion, even at 7. He'd already retired from Anbu by the time Naruto's abilities evading the Anbu had reached their legendary status. He hadn't wanted to believe Yugo or Yamato when they'd told him the boy could almost disappear at will, but now he was finding himself truly impressed. Just as suddenly as the boy had disappeared, Kakashi found himself staring at his blonde student. "I know I probably don't stand a chance, but I'd like to see how I stack up against a Junin," Naruto said. He knew that theoretically he had nearly surpassed Kakashi, but physically, that was no longer the case. Especially one as infamous as Sharingan Kakashi. Naruto wasted no time going on the attack. While it wouldn't be nearly as fluid as before, and was almost useless without Sage Chakra at least until he could gain enough control to safely channel chakra to his limbs to enhance his strikes like normal shinobi were able to, without blowing up his arms and legs in the process. His frog kata was still a formidable taijutsu style. Leading with a punch that was easily blocked, Naruto followed up with a spinning backhand to the other side. Kakashi also blocked this, but got a surprise when Naruto suddenly bent his arm to try for an elbow to the temple. Kakashi released him, and bent his head back to dodge the blow, before tossing Naruto away. Seems you're better than your file suggested," Kakashi said, both pleased and annoyed. "Looks like I won't even have time for Ika Ika." Looking on, both Sakura and Sasuke were wondering where this suddenly level of skill had come from, because he sure hadn't had it when he was in the academy. "Well, that didn't work," Naruto groaned, his hands forming a cross-ram seal. "Time to take this up another notch." Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 6 Narutos appeared, and sparing less than a tick to grin at his sensei, all 7 Narutos attacked at once. It was a testament to Kakashi's skill, that he was able to defend himself against the surprise attack from all 7. Despite the lack intelligence and natural talent that Naruto had possessed as an adolescent, his unpredictability still made him fairly capable as a shinobi. With some actual skill to back up Naruto's uniquely unusual skill set, so many of the blonde could easily overwhelm even a higher-level Chunin. Still, Kakashi wasn't an elite for nothing. 2 blocks, 3 dodges, and a captured fist later, Kakashi gave an eye smile before flashing into action, Disp. Rsing Kage Bunshin with a speed that Naruto wouldn't be able to keep up with for another 4 years in normal continuity. When there was only one left, Kakashi again gave Naruto an eye smile. "Well, I'll admit I'm impressed," Kakashi said. "For a moment, I thought little Uchiha-chan might be the only one on the team with any ability." "Let's try this again," Naruto said, creating another squad of clones, this time double the number. At first he'd only wanted to see how he'd stack up against his sensei. Now though, he wanted to get one of those bells. With a gesture, half of the cage bunchen attacked, while the rest disappeared. Giving Naruto a calculating look, Kakashi readied himself. The attack came just a bit faster than before, but this time, Kakashi was ready for it, and wasn't surprised by the skill of the clones. With an almost ease that annoyed the blonde, Kakashi dispatched of the clones. Just as he'd taken out the last with a lazy flick of a shuriken, the real Naruto attacked. Naruto threw a left kick that Kakashi ducked, but is again surprised when the boy pivots, and brings the foot back around, striking even faster than before. Kakashi blocks the attack by grabbing Naruto's leg, and almost gets clocked when the other foot makes a follow-up attempt on his head. After grabbing this leg as well, Kakashi realized what position the blonde was now in. Not giving the boy a chance to go for the bells which were within his reach, Kakashi brought his knee up to give the boy a shot to the sternum. Imagine his surprise when the boy he was holding dispersed into smoke, throwing his balance off for a moment. Naruto wasted zero time trying to capitalize, as several more clones came at Kakashi from all sides in a distraction. While Kakashi was busy engaging them, another Naruto suddenly shot out of the ground, and went for the bells. Kakashi only just dodged in time with a kawarimi causing several of the clones to end up attacking another of Naruto's clones, but Naruto was already on the attack, a plan already going through his mind. A clone at his back, Naruto went in for a punch, but found his plan derailed immediately. Kakashi again used a kawarimi, but this time with the clone that was tailing him. Naruto's punch dispersed the startled clone, and set Kakashi up for his next attack. A ninja isn't supposed to get caught from behind, Kakashi said, seriously. Sakura tried to yell a warning, but as Kakashi would inform him seconds later with a glint in his eye. Too late. Hiden Kona Haninpu, Senin Garashi. Quote, one thing that Naruto had learned about the kawarimi, so long as your chakra could overpower that of the target after the chakra for the jutsu was used, though catching your target off guard would allow someone with a weaker chakra to do the same, you could switch with anything, even other people. And if there was one thing that Naruto knew, it was that he could switch places with all of his teammates. A millisecond before Kakashi's thrust forward fingers connected, there was a puff of smoke, and Naruto was no longer standing in front of him, but a startled and confused Sasuke. Too bad for the Uchiha, he was already committed to the attack, and there was no way to stop it now. As Kakashi watched the Uchiha genius fly through the air from his chakra-enhanced poke, he couldn't help but smile beneath his mask. Using others as a meat shield to avoid embarrassing situations, Kakashi thought. He is his mother's son after all. Oh well, I'll have to catch him later, now to play with the others. A quick shunshin later, and Kakashi was gone. 888. From his place in Sasuke's former hiding spot, Naruto plotted his next move. Feeling out with his senses, Naruto located Sakura, and headed in that direction, knowing that she was next on Kakashi's torture list. He arrived just in time to hear his sensei say, Sakura, behind you. The Pinka turned, only to find Kakashi staring at her with his hands in a rat seal. A massive swirl of leaves later, and Sakura saw her sensei disappear. Eyes drooping drowsily, Sakura began to sway, a bit before snapping back to wakefulness. Huh, what was that? Sakura asked. Where'd he go? Sakura found herself very wary of the fact that Kakashi-sensei had snuck up behind her. She didn't want to be poked after all. A moment later she shook her head, grumbling about overly dramatic sensei using so many leaves to shunshin away, he hadn't used that many before. Just as she was about to go continue her search for Sasuke, she heard a voice behind her that made her heart flut. Call her name. Sasuke-kun, she said turning, a bright smile on her face. The smile rapidly fell to make way for a paled, horror-stricken visage when she caught sight of her beloved. He was kneeling on the ground, barely holding himself up with the help of a tree. There were kunai and shuriken sticking out of his arms, back, and chest, each wood bleeding freely. His left leg was broken at the shin, the foot turned facing backwards in a sickening manner. The most serious injuries, however, were his missing right eye, and the decapitated left arm which had been cut off from just above the elbow down. Her brain tried to come to terms with what it was seeing and what she knew. Sasuke-kun was the best, and nothing like this could ever happen to him, yet she could see just as plain as day that it had happened. From his perch above Kakashi, Naruto snickered when he saw Sakura's eyes go wide, tears begin to fall, but he almost started laughing when she screamed, and started foaming at the mouth. He could remember the time they'd been reminiscing about that first bell test, and she'd revealed what Kakashi foe RCED her to see. For a 13-year-old fangirl who Sakura had even admitted was ill-fit to be a ninja, that event was suitably traumatizing. I think I might have overdone it. Kakashi said. Nah, she needs a fangirl rude awakening. Naruto said, startling the Junin. I say you went easy on her. Don't worry, I'm not going to attack you again yet, I'm here for Sakura. Go play with Sasuke, now. I'm sure he's recovered from being molested, and is ready to prove he's better than you. Kakashi gave Naruto a queer look, before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. Naruto gave a sigh, before dropping to the ground next to his still frothing teammate. A quick henge later, and Sasuke Uchiha stood in the clearing. Squatting, Naruto placed his hand on her shoulder, and channeled some chakra into the unconscious girl, before backing up. A second later, Sakura shot up, gasping for breath, in a panic. Sasuke-kun, she cried out. What? Naruto asked, imitating the other boy. Sakura turned, and eyes wider than he'd ever seen them, tackled him to the ground, and hugged him tightly. Sasuke-kun, you're alright. She said. I thought you were. But I saw you. TCH, Kakashi used a genjutsu on you, Sakura. Her crush told her, causing her to blush in embarrassment. Look, we don't have much time left. I'm going to go find Naruto before he embarrasses us even more. Stay here, and don't move. Matter of fact, do nothing but sit there and breathe. Turning, Naruto leapt up into the trees, and took off to where he could sense a large flare of chakra. 888. While Naruto was attending to Sakura, Sasuke had recovered from his rectal violation, and returned for vengeance. Kakashi eyed the dark-haired genin glaring at him contemptuously with curiosity. Something tells me I won't be able to read my book with you either. Kakashi said, sizing up the dark-haired boy facing him, before putting said book away. Turns out he was right, and while the boy had as impressive a showing as Naruto's surprising attack, let's be honest. A genin facing a Junin is really an unfair fight. By the time Naruto arrived at the site of Sasuke's attempt at the bells, his teammate was already neck-deep in dirt. I don't know about you, but I want to kick this bastards, Naruto said, squatting in front of Sasuke's head. And I'm even willing to work with you to do it. Fine, he's going to pay for that jutsu. Sasuke growled. And I'm going to get you back for switching with me too, Dobi. Right, follow me, Sakura's waiting. Naruto said, ignoring Sasuke's threat. You know, if someone hanged into you, they could get her to do damn near anything. She better hope some pervert doesn't figure that out, or she could be in trouble. 888. Naruto sat with a somewhat excited expression on his face as he took in his sensei. The look of complete confusion on the man brought a smile to his features, though unless you knew to look at his eyes, and what exactly you were looking for, you'd never notice. Naruto could read his sensei like a book now, but even he could admit that sometimes it was an overly complicated book with unnecessarily big words. Although they hadn't gotten the bells, there was no doubt that they had passed the test. In the 5 minutes that they'd attacked together, all three of them had touched the bells at least once, and Sasuke had even gotten a hold of one of them, before Kakashi had done something to his hand to make him let go. From what he could see, Kakashi was in a bind. On the one hand, he was proud of them, and was looking forward to take a team, even if just to shut his naysayers up that he couldn't handle it. On the other, he was mourning the loss of precious reading time. Kakashi stared at them for a few moments longer, before giving his infamous eye smile. Congratulations, you passed. But sensei, we didn't get the bells. Sakura said. We weren't supposed to. Naruto said. Even with 3 fairly talented genin, us winning against a Junin is a complete joke. The whole point of this was about testing our teamwork. He threw in the part about only 2 of us passing to see if we'd turn on each other, or if we'd act like proper Leaf Shinobi and work together, anyway. I mean really, did either of you bother to remember the lecture we got on that? All genin squads are 3 genin to a Junin, unless one of them is lost on a mission. Even telling us not to eat was a test in seeing if we could think for ourselves, or if we'd take things at face value. Quote, then how do you explain apprenticeships? Kakashi teased. I could have been looking to find a proper apprentice. That's true, but not likely. Naruto said. In an apprenticeship, the sensei is even more responsible for their pupil than traditionally, as in almost a parent role. You're far too lazy to be bothered with the responsibilities of apprenticing a student. Since when have you been so smart? Sakura accused. What? Did you really think I was that stupid? Naruto asked in disbelief, knowing full well that he really had been that stupid, but needing an excuse not to be this time. Playing dumb was annoying. What? Are you telling us that you were hiding behind a mask of stupidity to protect yourself from something or someone? Sakura asked. Note to self, make sure Sakura isn't from the future too. Naruto thought. Never mind. She wouldn't be as pathetic as she is if she were. I'm gonna have to do something about that quickly. Not a mask, per se. Naruto said. Look, deception is a ninja's greatest tool. I downplayed the fact that I'm not a complete idiot, so that people would underestimate me. Let me ask you this. If me and Sasuke ended up in a fight against an enemy Chunin or Junin, who is most likely to survive that fight? Quote, Sasuke-kun of course. Sakura said, immediately. Kakashi initially would have been putting his money on Sasuke, but something made him pause that thought. Really, Sakura? Naruto asked. Then why don't you consider this? Sasuke is an Uchiha, the rookie of the year, very talented, and never passes up a chance to show off just how much better he is than everyone. I, on the other hand, was the class dead last, have never shown any talent for the shinobi arts, and just barely graduated. Which of us is the Chunin liable to take as a serious threat? Sasuke. Who is the Chunin more liable to fight seriously, not wanting to risk a brat getting lucky? Sasuke. Who is more liable to be killed right off the bat, the talented show-off with only a C-class cadent to his name, or the supposedly no talent kid, who can spam hundreds of Kage Bunshin like they're nothing? Sasuke. Kakashi said, nodding to the blonde. Seems like Naruto was the smarter shinobi after all. Not really, I got the idea from Shikamaru. Naruto admitted falsely. He may be a lazy bum, and I doubt he was intentionally doing it, but downplaying how skilled you really are was a good idea. As the team separated, Kakashi pulling Naruto aside briefly to discuss certain infringement issues, the Junin could only marvel at this team of is. While 2 out of his 3 genin had been just as their profiles had said, his third had been something of a surprise. Though if Iruka was to be believed about his unpredictability, Naruto had rather potently lived up to expectations as well. 888. It was a bit under 24 hours later that found Naruto headed to his team training grounds. He knew they'd be starting their missions today after waiting hours for Kakashi to show, and a bit of training, and had planned accordingly. During the several-hour wait for Kakashi to arrive, Naruto had worked on reorienting his body into instinctually using the frog kata. While this was going on, several dozen clones each were working on leaf sticking, and tree climbing. None of his clones could make it up a tree yet, but Naruto wasn't worried. By the time he dispelled them, and started doing the exercise for himself, he'd have the technique mastered, and its only real use would be for continued chakra control. Hopefully, by the time they got the wave mission, if they even got it this time, he'd have started his clones on combining the 2 exercises he was working on. As he was winding down, Naruto felt a familiar chakra signature tickle his senses. Sending out a small chakra pulse, he found, to his amusement, Hinata watching him. Kind of an odd way to want to spend your lunch break, but he wasn't going to complain. As long as she was interested in him, he had a chance at not screwing things up with her like last time. Hey, Hinata, Naruto exclaimed. Did you need something, or did you just come to watch me work up a nice, hard, sweat? Straining his ears, Naruto was able to hear the telltale thump of Hinata's faint-induced unconscious body hitting the ground. Naruto swiftly finished his exercises, and strolled over to where she had landed. Sighing, Naruto picked the girl up, and carried her to where Kurenai's team would be meeting to begin their mission for the day. He just hoped Kiba hadn't returned yet. Given that Horndog's sometimes overly possessive infatuation with Hinata, that was bound to be an annoying meeting. 888. Naruto had just finished receiving a quick lesson on tree climbing after all. A paper trail in this situation lessened suspicion when he heard the shriek of Sakura's voice yelling at Kakashi for being late. While he didn't have any real attraction to Sakura anymore, he couldn't help the slightly naughty thought that came to his mind. If she was that loud normally, he hated to see what she'd be like when someone finally got into prudish, Yayo Perv's pants, and really made her scream. Shaking his head of that thought, desperate to keep himself from thinking of Sakura in that manner ever again, Naruto reddened his jacket, and made his way to the team meeting. Naruto, you're late, Sakura yelled, he heard as soon as he cleared the tree line. Sorry I'm late, but Kurenai-sensei put me in time out for making Hinata-chan blush and faint. Kakashi's mouth dropped open, again. He thought he'd gotten the Gaki to understand that lateness and bad excuses were his thing. Though, he had to admit, Naruto's excuses were actually pretty good, which technically wasn't gimmick infringement. Damn. Naruto rolled his eyes when Sasuke and Sakura perked up after Kakashi told them that they were going to start taking missions. Boy were they going to be disappointed. Now that he knew the true purpose of D-rank missions, and not that bullshit teamwork crap that Kakashi went on about though. He realized that they'd probably needed the teamwork part drilled in before he taught them the other part. He was going to let the mission bother him. Hell, getting paid to do things that were so easy, well, easy if you knew how to do it right, was the best thing going right now. Besides, he now several different ways to make many of the more horrifying D-rank jobs easier, and less traumatizing. Naruto rubbed his hands, and almost cackled evilly. He couldn't wait until they got that babysitting job. The Inaguchi triplets were in for a rude awakening if they thought they were going to get away with the shit they normally pulled on genin babysitters. They were going to pay for dyeing his hair black, and doubly so if they turned Hinata-chan blue again. 888. They had been a team for 3 weeks, and sadly nothing in the routine had changed well, with the exception of their mission success rate, and the number they'd been able to do. Kakashi still showed up late, prompting him to show up even later, with much better excuses than his sensei he might add. Sasuke and Sakura still sat there wasting 3 hours that could be put to better use, just waiting on their sensei, and basically wasting their potential. Naruto finally decided to do something about it, after he took care of one small detail that he really should have taken care of sooner. BUT supplies were hard to come by on his budget, and he didn't want to borrow from Gigi too much now that he was a ninja. He'd sat for almost an hour in the next training ground over from the one his team used, as a shadow clone applied the training seals that he'd used during his training trip with Jiraiya. While the application didn't take much time at all, waiting for the ink to dry did. Without going into too much detail, because Naruto had tuned out most of Jiraiya's explanation, they would put a resisting strain on his body that would increase his strength, speed, chakra reserves, and his chakra control to a small extent. Afterwards, Naruto ran through the first 2 forms of the frog kata real time against a clone, since he'd need to either become a sage or learn to properly channel chakra for attack enhancement before he could try using the other 3 in a battle simulation. Cutting his training short, and showing up a good hour before Kakashi was scheduled to arrive, Naruto made it to the bridge, and sat down on the railing next to where Sakura was standing. You know, I'm starting to think that his lateness is a test. Naruto said. What kind of test? Sakura asked. Sasuke was silent, but Naruto could tell by the slight incline of his head that he was interested too. You know, to see if we'd actually make use of the time he's giving us, or if we'd just sit here looking stupid. Naruto answered. Especially considering all the other squads of talked to have said that they start at the same time that we do, only with team training and exercises. Then after lunch, they do missions. Given that Kakashi-sensei doesn't show up until 11, then we train for maybe an hour, and break for lunch. Maybe he expects us to use our time more wisely. Again, Sakura and Sasuke were shocked by the level of intelligence shown by the class idiot. Well, what are we supposed to do? Sakura asked. Sensei hasn't given us anything to work on. Well, Hinata's team is doing this really cool exercise called tree climbing. Naruto said. Kurenai-sensei showed me how to do it. What you have to do? 888. When Kakashi finally showed up 10 minutes later than normal to try and arrive after his student and saw them working tree climbing, he gave an eye smile. Finally they got the hint that they should have been using their time more efficiently. Perching himself in the tree Sakura was working on, Kakashi snapped his beloved book open, and began to read. Kakashi was content to let his little genin keep going, and take a late lunch as it would give him more time with his precious, but alas, things weren't in his favor. A mere 10 minutes after they normally broke for lunch, things took a sour turn. How'd you get so good at this? Sasuke growled. Remember that day I told you Kurenai-sensei put me in timeout for making Hinata faint? Naruto asked. That's when I learned it. You mean that you've been holding out on us this entire time? Sasuke spat, highly annoyed that the Dobi had mastered a skill that he hadn't. Sakura gave a slight glare as well when Naruto just shrugged. You didn't ask. The reply, while true, wasn't exactly fair, considering they hadn't even known about it. Sasuke glared hard at Naruto. He'd known that the Dobi was going to hold him back, but that he'd been doing it intentionally was unforgivable. All right, let's break for lunch. Kakashi said, appearing in a swirl of leaves. He'd sensed the impending squabble that was about to occur, and decided to head it off this time. Geez, you're even later than normal. Sakura grumbled. Well, when I arrived and saw my cute little genin working so hard, I didn't want to disturb you. Sakura blushed, Sasuke glared, and Naruto raised an eyebrow. Lunch was a quick, quiet affair, and soon the group was ready to restart the day. Now, we're going to skip the mission room today. Kakashi said. Since you all finally decided to act like shinobi, I figure I'd teach you all something that would complement your individual styles. Any one thing that you can think of, if I'm capable of teaching you how, then I will. Naruto grinned, he knew exactly what he was going to ask about. Now, while I'm working with each of you individually, the other two will spar. So, who's first? Sasuke looked about to claim the first spot, but Naruto elbowed him in the side. Ladies, first, Tem. Naruto said. That means Sakura, unless there's something you're trying to hide from us. Sasuke's glare told him exactly what the boy thought of Naruto's insinuations. TCH, whatever. Kakashi smiled beneath his mask. Okay, Sakura, come with me. Naruto and Sasuke, light contact sparring. The two boys looked at each other, and frowned. Bah, it's no fun if we can't beat each other senseless. Sasuke, as much as he'd never admit it, couldn't help but agree. Beating each other until they couldn't stand was fun in its own way, well, when he had the upper hand, anyway. The Dobi could hit pretty damn hard when he wanted to. Still, orders were orders. A silent agreement passed through the boys though. Next time they were allowed full contact, they were both going to the hospital to make up for it. Dropping into the academy stance, for that was the only one that allowed them to take it easy on each other, they both charged. Ed. 888. 20 minutes later, Kakashi ended the spar. Both male genin, highly bored with it after the first 2 minutes, were just going through the motions, and didn't look to even be trying. I guess I came back just in time. Kakashi said. Alright, Naruto, come with me. After leading him away from the other two, who were sparring more like Sakura was attacking gently in order to not hurt her crush, as if she really could, and Sasuke was just practicing dodging. Kakashi turned to Naruto. Okay, Naruto, pick your poison. Kakashi said, grinning behind his mask, just knowing that Naruto would want something flashy and overpowered. He was sorely disappointed, well, not really, but a little. I want to learn the Shunshin. Naruto replied. I know it's supposed to be for upper level nin, but you said any jutsu. I could have picked something you don't know like the Rasengan, just to mess with you. Quote. That you could have. Kakashi said, deciding not to mention that he did know the jutsu, never knowing that Naruto knew he knew the jutsu. Alright, here are the seals. 888. As Kakashi and Naruto rejoined his other teammates, the Junin couldn't help but marvel at his sensei's son. It was like the harder a technique was, the easier it was for him to learn it. While he was utterly horrible at performing simple jutsu meant for kids his own age, give him a technique meant for shinobi chunin level or above, and he was able to properly use it at least once within a short amount of time, even if he did ridiculously overpower it. Had they still been around, Naruto would have been the ultimate anti-Sharingan shinobi, especially considering the Sharingan's weakness, and the majority of the clan's habit of not taking time to actually learn the jutsu they copied before trying to us. It. Naruto and Sakura, spar a bit while I work with Sasuke. Naruto rolled his eyes at the girl's smirk as their sensei escorted Sasuke away. Well, he said he was going to break her out of her delusional fangirl phase, now was as good a time as any to start. With a cocky gesture, Naruto signaled for Sakura to make the first move. Ladies first, he said. Sakura charged Naruto with her fist cocked back, expecting Naruto's usual shocked expression just before she clocked him, or he dodged. Rapidly closing the distance, Sakura punched, but found herself startled when Naruto blocked her attack, and punched her in the stomach, hard. Not giving her a chance to recover, Naruto kneed her in the chin, snapping her head back, and finished with a strong left that sent her face first to the ground with a split lip. Sakura looked up in horror, and eyes filled with tears accused. You hit me. Well, yeah, it's a spar, you're supposed to. He didn't see why she was so surprised. Hadn't she seen what he'd done against their sensei the first day, or even noticed how easy it was for him to keep up with Sasuke, yet he always seemed to struggle against her. But you never could before. Naruto almost groaned at her statement. Surely she didn't think she was that good, did she? Before I was so infatuated with you that I'd let you beat on me, so that you thought you were doing so methy. With that illusion removed, I don't feel a need to do so. As a matter of fact, I should apologize to you, because I was actually hurting your development as a ninja. Now, you can either concede defeat, or get back up, and we keep going. Sakura glared, not believing that Naruto was better than her. What followed was a rather eye-opening beating for Sakura, one filled with numerous cuts, massive future bruises, and a destroyed pride. Over with Sasuke and Kakashi, the two had been stunned into immobility when Naruto had actually attacked Sakura. The only reason he hadn't told the two light contact was because he knew Sakura's weak physical disposition couldn't really hurt Naruto, and Naruto had never once tried to actually fight her in spars before. As the one-sided fight continued, even Sasuke was starting to feel sorry for the girl. He winced as Naruto's knee collided with Sakura's back, causing her to cry out in pain. Shouldn't you, stop this? Quote. No, it's a good lesson for Sakura. Kakashi said. She's finally getting a taste of what can happen in the field, thankfully from a friendly source. Back with the two sparring genin, Sakura could be found laying on the ground in the fetal position, clutching her stomach painfully, with tears ro. ling down her cheeks. Now, Sakura, I'm going to give you a bit of advice that I want you to seriously consider. If you're serious about being a ninja, then this prissy, girly thing you've got going has got to stop. The pampering, the diets, the spending more time on your hair and nails than you do your training, the not wanting to get messy, sweaty, or dirty, it has got to change. All of that crap you're buying into is a civilian luxury that a real kunoichi can't afford to waste time on. Just so you know, I will be talking to Kakashi-sensei about this. Either get your act together, or turn your headband in, and give up. This way we'll have enough time to replace you with a serious kunoichi before we start taking more serious missions. Quote 888. Another week and some passed, the three genin finally making some significant progress with the new skill they'd learned from Kakashi, well except for Naruto, who had majorly cheated with Kage Bunshin once he felt he had the jutsu right. Just like nearly every other practice, things went well until Naruto did something new that set the last Uchiha off. This time it was Naruto using a shunshin against Sasuke to close the distance faster than Sasuke was ready for, before punching him in the stomach. Once again, things devolved from there into an argument that always had the same ending. Naruto would insult the Uchiha clan in some form or another, and Sasuke would reply the same way every time. You're just jealous of my Sharingan. Kakashi sighed at the same predictable retort, knowing that it wasn't true. After a while, when he realized that nothing he said would matter, Naruto just started to ignore his teammate at this point, and they were able to continue the day. Naruto gawked at the boy, before shaking his head in disbelief. And they really call this guy a genius. He then got a very interesting idea. First of all, you don't have it yet, and there's a chance that you may not ever activate it. Naruto said, startling Kakashi with his reply. Sasuke glared at his teammate, knowing that it was true. Second, why would I be jealous of the Sharingan, when I've got a bloodline too? Naruto boasted. Yep, that definitely got his attention. Naruto, I knew both your parents, you don't have a bloodline. Kakashi said. Yes I do, on my mother's side. Naruto said. It's the, Naruto looks up. Help me out here. Less than a second later, Naruto felt a searing pain in his eyes that caused him to growl in pain, and shut his rapidly tearing eyes. Naruto? Kakashi asked. Naruto finally opened his eyes, and began blinking away the moisture that had formed there. Shaking his head to alleviate the pain, and giving himself time to recall the new information, Naruto smirked at what he found. My bloodline doesn't have a name, as the Uzumaki clan weren't so prideful about it like the Hyuga and Uchiha that it had to have a spectacular name. Sasuke just knew that was a slight at his family, and gave Naruto patented Uchiha Glare number 34. It grants the user impeccable natural vision equal to, possibly greater than even the Byakugan and Sharingan. They had unparalleled night vision, and can see just as well in the dark as in the daytime. With a bit of concentration, and maybe a small amount of chakra for the lower level, an Uzumaki could see up to almost 2 kms clearly. Not only that, but it gave them a very strong ability to notice even the minutest of details, making them virtually immune to most normal genjutsu. The Kurama clan is a notable exception, as well as certain Sharingan-based genjutsu. This attention to detail makes it very difficult for them to be tricked by switching, replacing, and transformation jutsu too. It's also what made the Uzumaki clan so good with Fuinjutsu. I've never heard of an Uzumaki clan in Konoha. Sasuke taunted. That's because they weren't a clan of Konoha. Naruto answered. They were from Whirlpool Country. There have only been 3 Uzumaki to live here, the Shodai's wife Mito, my mother, and me. I'm the only one to ever be born here though. Kakashi, of course, already knew all of this, though he did wonder how Naruto found out. He was however concerned with something else. Naruto, who were you talking to? Kakashi asked. More importantly, how did you get that bloodline? I was talking to a friend beyond the 4th wall, don't worry about it Kakashi-sensei. Naruto explained. As for the bloodline, I got it from a really big plot hole. Deciding to ignore it for now, and talk to the Hokage about it later, Kakashi gave his team its next assignment. Right, well, today I've got a special mission for you. Kakashi said, a sinister grin on his face. I've finally been able to reserve the Capture Tora mission for you. All three genin paled. They'd heard horror stories from Team 8 who'd actually done the mission 3 times to date, and Naruto also remembered the numerous times he'd done the mission, both before and after his training with G. Raya. The sad thing is, it never got easier, not even for Chunin or Junin level ninja. For Naruto, this also marked another thing he'd been both anticipating and dreading, the mission to Wave. This time, he was determined to save a certain pair, at the very least Haku. First things first, though, dealing with that evil demon cat Tora. Still, with all of the plans running through his head, he couldn't help the ominous feeling in the back of his mind. If only he could see NB's face at that moment, he'd know at the very least why he had that sudden bout of paranoia. Fine, I'll meet you in Gigi's office, I've got some things to set up first. Before shunshining away in purple flames, Naruto added. See ya. And then he was gone. Okay, now that was a nice exit. Kakashi muttered. I'll have to see if he'll teach me that.